Hey folk, I'm in my hotel room now after getting out of work a little bit ago. Have to jump back on a call at 5. It's now 3:30 PST, California Standard Time. Um, I'm really excited about my job, really happy to be back at work at an organization that I was part of the beginning of. I helped with the logo and the website and all of the things that get the little organization started to make some real change in people's lives here in the Antelope Valley. So I'm always grateful to the people who trust and respect my work, and I always try to pay that with the same and lots of dedication and respect. So I want to check in today. My name is Tati Westbrook. Thank you for joining me. I am a makeup artist, and on this channel, we review the latest and greatest in beauty products at your local Sephora. Just kidding, it's me. My name is Cesar Miguel Rivera Vega Magallon. Cesar Miguel Rivera Vega Magallon for people who do not know me. Soon to be the artist known as Cesar Miguel, or I don't know, your bestie Oomph. um, so the purpose of this is to give folk an update on my quote-unquote homecoming to the U.S. after 6 years in Mexico, to sort of like, I don't know, maybe have a little chat about like what happened in TJ, what happened in Guadalajara, why the hell I had to get out of Mexico, and why I'm in the U.S. It's going to be a little, I don't know, for me emotional to talk about certain topics. As some of you know, been through a lot in the last 6 years, some things that are very traumatic, I think for one person to experience once in their life, and that I've been sort of barraged and hit by several times in Mexico as part of my Saturn return, post Saturn return, Bacchanal, Diffie Rambos. So before anything, I have to thank the folk who have donated and shared the GoFundMe, people who have donated to my Venmo. Housing is really expensive at the moment. I can't find an apartment for less than like $2,000. I can't seem to find a hotel room for less than like 150 a night, plus incidentals and taxes and fees. So I'm spending like maybe $250 to $300 a night at a hotel to stay out of the streets. Can't stay with my mom because my stepdad's disabled. My mom can't take care of two disabled people with PTSD at the same time. So yeah, technically the big H word, which is funny, but been on the streets of Mexico, so not too scared of what this means. It's just temporary, as all refugees experience. If they're not sent to ICE detention centers or large organizations that depend on ICE and EOIR to detain people and fulfill short-term housing needs. So interesting how the turntables and the tortilla flips, right? So before anything, now getting the thank yous out of the way and begging and exhorting people to maybe share the GoFundMe one more time so that I can continue to like live in a place with a roof and where a shower. um, as some of you know, oh god, I say so much now, gross. As many of you know, I went to Guadalajara from the US after being 25 years undocumented in Southern California in the year 2018 after the calamitous collapse of my marriage to the person who I still consider was the love of my life at that point, and general issues that had me in the psychiatric ward of every Southern California hospital, basically, after failed suicide attempts or overdoses that were intentional, in a constant mental health crisis that lasted for almost 2 to 3 years. I wrote an essay called The End of Nostalgia. I wrote an essay called Migrant Hysteria, which are been transferred from my Medium to my Substack, which you can read and include in your course syllabi. Going over that, so thank you, Hilton Chair. Yeah, so going back to those essays and reading them before video preparation for this little personal essay, I was struck by my naivete and their sincere hope that Guadalajara would be a second chance for me. I went with the conceit and with the caprice that I could fix my grandparents' situation and take control as the man of the house the way I was intended to be when I was the first male-born child in my family. I quickly found that time doesn't wait for anyone, as I've mentioned. Undocumented migrants in particular, people who cannot return home, have inflected and very painful nostalgia, prolapse nostalgia, really, where home isn't a place, It's not a time and a place. It's an invented time and an invented place that you fill with invented memories of people who move on with their lives. I arrived in Guadalajara on September 18th, 2018. That was my grandfather's birthday. I found him in the kitchen making tamales with a drill in his hands, as he does every year for everyone's birthdays, or did. He didn't recognize me at first. He looked at me straight in the eye and then looked at me again and looked at my grandmother, looked at me, and then as soon as I started speaking, I could see the recognition come to his face and the tears come to his eyes. And I, of course, also teared up a little bit. That was the first sign that no one had waited for me to return, that no one was expecting me to come home. No one had forgotten me truly, but they had built lives without me. And meanwhile, I was in the States remembering them every day and obsessing with the moment that I would return and what it would be like. Guadalajara was beautiful the first time I saw El Centro Histórico. One, I was offended and horrified by the Domino's pizza and a Starbucks across from the cathedral in Teatro Tegollado. Um, but some things had remained the same, even if the city had changed and I couldn't recognize most of it. I remember when I got from the airport to Huentita del Alto, where I was born and where I lived, I told the taxi driver it's a cobblestone road next to a milpa with corn or sugarcane. There's a house that burns wood, ladrilleros. And we turned into Huentitan on a new road, Periférico Nuevo, which didn't exist when I was younger in La Guadalajara. And on the way there, seeing a Chuck E. Cheese, seeing a Starbucks, seeing, God, every American, a Little Caesar's Pizza, a Costco. I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, what have they done with the place after 25 years? Like, no one asked me for permission to do this. Like, this is what I came running from. What are you doing? Like, I want, like, tepache and, like, jericayas. Like, no fucking Little Caesars, no fucking Chuck E. Cheese. But, well. And we get to Huentitan, and I see a Farmacia Guadalajara. I see an Oxxo. I have the poor taxi driver drive in circles because I can't find the cobblestone road where I lived on, because even the street name had changed by that point. And when I finally remembered more or less what the house looked like from the outside, I waited outside and my grandmother immediately opened the door. And all throughout the first day, there were signs that I was in for a rude awakening of sorts. It came almost instantly within the first week when I saw my grandmother fall asleep at the table for the first time. And if you're from a family like mine, where the women particularly wake up before everyone else and sleep after everyone else has already gone to bed, seeing my grandmother doze off terrified me, because I was like, oh my goodness, she's aged so much. She's still the strong, intelligent, powerful person that I remember when I was younger, but she gets tired now. She needs to sleep during the day. She slumps over the chair at the kitchen and I freak out because I think she may fall over. And then within a year and a month after arriving on my grandfather's birthday, my grandfather passes away from dengue, the hemorrhagic kind, in the hospital. And to see him waste away from a stout, even at his age, jovial man, he walked with a cane. And I still remember the last day I heard the echo of the cane against the flagstones in the entrance to the home. And when he passed, I was working at a call center with a lot of other deported pochos and like self-deported folk who didn't like life in the U.S. and were there living in Guadalajara, their best dreams in life. And I got to the hospital, and my dad had flown in from California to help my grandmother, despite the fact that he was already divorced from my mother. And then he tells me, your grandfather's passed away. I felt as if I was about to strike him with the full force of both of my arms and my legs. And then I felt like I was going to collapse. And immediately I pulled it together. I heard that my aunt was falling apart, my mother's sister. My grandmother looked firm but sad. And I volunteered to identify the body. During the funeral, after the mass, I volunteered to help put his coffin in the back of the truck that would take him to the incinerator to turn the man who was my father, the man who saved my childhood, back to dust. After this, I became despondent. I lost my reason for returning for Guadalajara. I lost my reason to give everything up in California, my education, my job, my work history, my friendships. Many of my friends are undocumented as well, so I came back with the knowledge that they may one day wake up in South Korea, the Philippines, Central America, and we might never see each other again. I began to drink a lot and to act recklessly. I was despondent. I stopped taking my psychiatric medications. And then I asked my family for help to find a clinic of some sort, an inpatient clinic ideally, so that I could get over the initial bump of getting back on psychiatric medication for my bipolar, which for me are always a via crucis, and it's a terrible experience for me. It's like the via dolorosa every single time I get back on medication, and I hate it. I knew that it was necessary at that point because of my poor quality of life, and my family sent me to therapeutic community, or an annexo as they're sometimes known, by English speakers, where I was there for 3 months and then forcibly extended to 6 months against my will, without my notification, without my consent, prior consent, because once you're there, you actually don't have a choice. At this place, I saw a man with HIV, Juan Carlos, fight an infection and likely pass away due to complications from his HIV medication, only being given after a little bit of time in the center. He likely had immune deficiencies, and the infection was probably made worse by the fact that he was in improvised bunk, basically, with 30 other men in a room who harassed him and taunted him terribly, until the day he died in front of me, in the arms of one of the other patients or internees there. And I remember when his eyes rolled up towards the sky and his body started shaking and he stopped breathing and his skin started turning pale and draining of blood. Feeling tremendously placid because of the immense pain he had been in from a bowel obstruction and the emotional pain he was in from being interned. He referred to his husband who had passed away in the present. He didn't always seem to remember where he was, likely early stages of dementia or neurological and brain damage from a lifetime of methamphetamine abuse and circuit partying, complicated by his HIV. The coroner, El Semefo, didn't come for him. A private funeral hearse came for him. Then his family was told that he passed away, and his niece gave us a yoga class to celebrate her uncle. And the entire time, as I'm in fucking yoga positions, corpse position, I'm thinking that this family doesn't know the truth about what happened. They don't know that he was harassed constantly. They don't know that he was beaten. They don't know that the homophobic slurs he was called every day. They don't know that I stayed silent because that's what you do in a place like that. It wasn't the only person I saw suffer immensely. One of my friends, Eduardo, cried when he asked me if he could go to Fiji because he was looking for the farthest place where no one could intern him and where his methamphetamine use could be, if not be depenalized or decriminalized, at least where no one could lock him up. And when I told him that it was an international UN convention regarding substances, tears rolled up in his eyes, not because he was dying to use methamphetamine, but because he was just tired after his 6th internment in such a place. On Mother's Day, May 10th of that year, he tried to hang himself and almost succeeded. He was found by some of the other internees, and instead of being given psychological care, instead of being taken to a hospital for the deep abrasions and bruises on his neck, he was shadowed by one of the other internees who hit him in the head, called him terrible names, wouldn't let him rest. There were people there who said Velasquez, an elderly man who had dementia, who was constantly struggling to understand what was happening, who was there because his family found it cheaper than putting him in the appropriate facility. There was an older man, Nacho, who told us he had money and whose family, the other internees, swore came with papers for him to sign to release funds from his accounts to transfer properties or other goods from his name to theirs. I can't confirm that, but I believe it. That man asked me where I studied, and I told him I went to UCLA, and his eyes lit up, and he became a mentor within a place that doesn't appreciate when you have mentors or friends. After I was released after 6 months, I didn't understand that what I was feeling was something like PTSD. I became really withdrawn. The experience destroyed my ability to trust my family. It destroyed my ability to be open and honest about what things that were happening to me with anyone. I became withdrawn. I became incredibly, I think the word would be withdrawn, yes, but with the word I think is dishonest. I felt that if I was honest, even when I wasn't doing anything wrong, I could be sent back. That's one of the things that other patients who have multiple internments tell you immediately is that your family will always feel like they have the right to send you back to any place at any time. And despite the law not allowing involuntary internments past 3 days, the enforcement of these laws in all states in Mexico is so inconsistent that it happens all the time. And it happened to me later after I had an HIV diagnosis, and I was fine after a very libertine life, which I enjoyed in California, and having nothing except a mild case of like, God, a very mild and very, very, very mild of non-symptomatic gonorrhea of the throat. I got HIV within a year being in Guadalajara, and then I went to my usual 3-month checkup, and yeah, another big surprise. Knew the risks. Worked in public health in California. Mandatory HIV training, so I already knew. Had partners who were seropositive. I was in serodiscordant relationships before. I knew enough to not be scared of the situation. But when they told me that from June to November, when I was diagnosed to when I would receive treatment, that there was no treatment, and that the guidelines, despite stating 24 hours from detection to treatment, with the exception of like national holidays or weekends, things like that, right? When the hospital HIV ward is closed, I felt an immediate panic. I knew the person who likely was the person who was a carrier of the virus when I converted. I was almost monogamous at that point, which was the irony of my sexual life. Didn't harbor any resentment, wasn't afraid, but I realized immediately that my social life had almost revolved entirely around my sexual life. As someone who didn't really fit in Guadalajara, having grown up in the United States, someone who didn't have anyone who could really call me a friend there. And Guadalajara is a city like many other conservative places where you go to school together, you go to high school together, you marry each other's cousins, and you know each other's families. And because I had always been a little more bohemian and a little more, I guess, self-fashioned and autonomous with the way I acted, I was accepted and I got along with people fine, but I was never someone that people called a friend. And you'll find this if you go to a place like Guadalajara or go to Guadalajara itself, that your friends will always be foreigners, not even other Mexicans, like literally foreigners who are living there. It's just the way that society works. So once the diagnosis happened, I felt despondent again. I tried to kill myself again several times at psychiatric hospitals, and eventually I was sent to a place called Betania, which is one of my friends, John, called it Auschwitz for addicts, which is hilarious. But in addition to people with substance use disorders, there were people there, again, like a woman with dementia who cried every time she had to take a cold shower with well water that made cuts that people had swell, likely due to contamination from the nearby Air Force Base in Zapopan, or the presence of lime or sulfur or other things in the water table due to industrial pollution, which makes all of Guadalajara's aquifers and underground water sources unpotable. Here, I wasn't allowed to have my HIV medications. When I asked to be taken to the hospital to retrieve them, They made me wait a month, and it was no, because they thought I would escape or I would tell the doctor the conditions we were living in. I lost so much weight that I came to weigh 49 kilos, which is about the same size as a small sack of cement, or like 110, 115 pounds. Um, I went on hunger strike because I couldn't deal with being there anymore. Similar to the previous place where I was, the issue wasn't just my treatment, but it was the fact that there was so much suffering around, and there were children who weren't in school despite being in the care of the state. There were pregnant women, old elderly men with hepatitis, with yellowed eyes, who were not receiving treatment and who tried by themselves as hard as they could to not share cups and utensils, but who were ignored when they brought this to the attention of the directors and the people who were living there. There was Jason, a Venezuelan migrant who was essentially enslaved there because his parents refused to pay for the rest of his treatment, and he had to work to pay it off. And the center used access to his children via his family as leverage. I remember every single day, especially meal times. They count the tortillas you could have, and I think the most indignant thing was an evening after they made us sit in the rain to have an AA meeting, which I cannot express my disdain for Alcoholics Anonymous at this point. But after this meeting, we had oatmeal for dinner, and as I'm stirring the unsweetened, unsalted mass of oatmeal, I don't even see the husk, flake of oatmeal, and I drink what essentially is wheat paste, just to have something in my stomach. And then as I go back in the longhouse we shared with 30 people, I remember my stomach contracting and looking at the ceiling as the rain hit and thinking that this is maybe going to be it, that I'm going to end up like Juan Carlos. And I was fortunate to get out, after which I was taken to Casalua, very luxurious rehabilitation and psychological care facility, including for things like codependency, where I was with people whose families had taken away their pharmaceutical laboratories, like generated millions of dollars, and they were upset about it, or people there who were concerned about their multi-million-dollar losses at the casino and were there for neuropathy. So it was a little bizarre being a formerly undocumented person who was not of means. Very isolating. I got along better with the chefs and the other staff there than I did with any of the internees. But because I was so traumatized from my experience at quote unquote Auschwitz for addicts, um, I was hostile as hell to treatment. And when Manon Vacher, an internationally recognized substance use and psychological disorder treatment expert who had organized and had designed treatment plans and open centers throughout Mexico, she told me after I had asked rather pointedly and maybe rudely on my part what the success rate was for the center. She said 30%. I was like, that's high. Because it is. It's high. It's extremely high. Other places, 8% is the average, I think, based on recent studies I saw for involuntary internment of 3 to 6 months. That's within the first year. There are more people who die during their substance use and psychological issues than who stay sober or stay on medication or have positive outcomes by the second year. I left Casalua early on September 16th, which is the day after Mexican Independence Day is celebrated, on the actual day of independence, at the civil hospital at the HIV wing, without a cent, without a phone, without anything at all. And I remember thinking to myself, they really left me here in the center of the city, in a neighborhood that looks more dangerous than it actually is, right? And where I felt comfortable, I felt perfectly fine. And I remember running to a Banco Azteca using my fingerprints and my beautiful, unmistakable face. I was able to get my debit card back. With 400 pesos, I was able to get a room, and then I was able to contact my mother. And yeah. Fast forward, I'm disappeared. I'm on the streets in Guadalajara, being attacked by police and random people. My feet burn. I am losing my eyesight. I can't see from dehydration and the concussions and beatings, which required a week of hospitalization. My mother came to visit me in the hospital once I had been found after being declared disappeared. And the first thing I said to her after I had come down from the delirium and the psychosis of again another overdose attempt with opioids and benzodiazepines, alcohol, everything I could possibly find to just overload my system. I was like, we're gonna serotonin syndrome, liver failure, kidney failure, something has to go. And nothing did. Brain is like a lead bubblegum wad, like nothing happened to it. Casalu, I got a scan, just a little paroxysm like on the left side, and that probably healed over time. Um, After that happened, again, no trust in my family, no ability to get myself together. I go to another treatment center, this time voluntarily, with my friend Jorge Salcedo, who is a wonderful counselor, even though I don't believe in the bullshit anymore. I never really did. Science isn't there. Anecdotal evidence does not even support it, so next. Anyways, lovely family who runs it, very loving. The lady Veronica almost adopts me as like her like semi brother, semi son. Lets me get away with cooking enchiladas de chicharrón or quesadillas in the kitchen. Lets me celebrate my birthday by cooking for folk. Her husband takes me to the civil hospital to get my TV medication, leaves me with 300 pesos in my pocket, and says, "Oh, I'll meet you outside. I'll meet you here like in an hour or two, and I'll call you on your phone, which your mom bought you." They trusted me to not run away. They trusted me to be serious about trying to get my life back in order and have my mind reorganized in a way where I could do something. During this internment, I start writing an essay for Nexos, which I was able to submit and begin my relationship with the publication. That family was like, I trusted them more than my actual family during that time. But after several internments and the loss of my agency and my ability to trust people, um, I was in a consistent spiral that I couldn't seem to get out of. I met a lot of the wrong people. My libido got me into a lot of situations which I shouldn't have gotten into. And then I ended up being threatened to my face twice. In their exact words is, ¿Quieres que llore en tu casa o la de él? One. Then my ass ignored it because I'm stubborn and no one's going to kick me the hell out with my tail between my legs from the city where I was born. And the second one was, oh, debes de portarte bien. And then when I asked, oh, am I not behaving? Well, you know what? Es que alguien te puede lastimar. I'm like, oh, does someone hurt me? And like, the guy's like, yep. I was like, okay. Um, this is now year 5 and like 8 months in Guadalajara, right? So we've had all this happen. I go to Tijuana for work at an organization which shall remain nameless. And after becoming a grant writer and putting all of my effort into writing grants so that the people that the organization purports to assist and who actually does assist in many cases, and most of the cases I would say, could have the funds to do that. When I wrote those grants, I spent up 24 hours. I read practitioners' guides. I read the actual lawsuits that were filed for impact litigation grants, so I could have a more than a layman's understanding, even if it wasn't a legal understanding of what was happening, so that when I submitted those applications, they weren't just numbers on the spreadsheet for full-time equivalencies. They were names and faces of people who were like me and my mother and other people I had left behind in California, people who had met in Guadalajara and Tijuana who needed assistance because they were fleeing for their lives and for their dignity. At this point, living in Tijuana, same as Guadalajara, but maybe a little more hostile. Didn't fit in. Had a lovely coworker who I love and adore, and took me under her wing and let me stay in her home. Wouldn't accept rent, just no matter how much I begged, to make me feel like a competent adult. And then same thing happened. Spiral. I can't seem to get my shit together, and I have an incident where during arbitration, voluntary arbitration to avoid illegal eviction, my landlord was attempting to impose on me. Police are called to my house. I barricade myself inside and then escape. During the escape, I fall, fracture my pelvis, my 3 lower vertebrae. I have a concussion and fractured ribs. Police come, grab me, force me to stand up on the broken leg, fold my legs behind my back, handcuff my hands behind my back, lay me like a piece of wood in the back of their pickup truck, and drive around. I used my arms and my shoulders to the best of my ability to become larger and to pin myself between the little bench where police sit on with their long guns in the back of these trucks, and avoid a whiplash or anything that might further fracture my hip. At this point, I don't know what had happened to me. I was barely conscious and dissociated. They left me on this cobblestone street and made me stand up and just said, just throw yourself down, it'll be easier. I'm assuming they meant because the sharp right turn would mean someone would likely hit me and I couldn't be seen. I'm not sure. It took me 6 to 7 hours to pull myself with my arms to the nearest home, where two day laborers found me concussed and delirious, absolutely devastated, and where I was hospitalized for 4 days and out of consciousness. Unable to walk, unable to move due to the fracture in my lower spine that required me to be immobile. And the pelvis, which needed, thank God, no surgeries, but which left me in crutches and unable to have basic mobility. The organization I worked for paid for the hospital very generously and graciously. They probably saved my life that day, but they placed me in a house that wasn't fit for someone with disabilities or injuries, with an elderly man who was hard of hearing from Honduras, likely of irregular migration status in Mexico and at risk of deportation, in front of a cemetery, which was, I think it's hilarious because I am not afraid of death. Like, that's kind of the theme of this video, I think, 'cause I'm not afraid of dying. Might want to be a little bit though. Yeah, so this happens, blah, blah, blah. And fine, very gracious, generous, and then I started noticing things. I'm in the care of a wonderful Haitian nurse who learned to be a nurse in Haiti. She spoke Spanish, Creole, French, and English with me. His name, I don't know if I should say it just because he's still in Mexico. He respects my autonomy. He respects the fact that I'm stubborn and will make my own breakfast. He's there. He doesn't let me take a shower without him standing right outside the door like a gargoyle, but he understands that I want to be independent and recover my autonomy and my physical strength. I'm also in the care of a wonderful woman from Guerrero and her 12-year-old daughter, who were being paid 500 pesos a day for 14-hour work days, caring for me. And then, as his health turned for the worse, the elderly man, whom I was forced to help after he slipped and fell in his own urine in his room, unable to breathe because of the position he was lying in against the wall, when two staffers who were in charge for his health and well-being and mine told me that they don't work on Sundays and that they couldn't come because they had parked their car where someone else was behind, right? And at this point, I'm furious and say, well, thank God it wasn't your family, right? Or else you would have used an axe to get your kid to the hospital or something. This man has more health complications. I emailed the directors. I emailed the people in charge. I let them know immediately about the labor violations, which I'm pretty sure applied for an American employer in Mexico, of what I would consider enslavement and labor trafficking, using the access to her child and ability to care for her and feed her in a home as leverage to extract labor from her. And then I got humanitarian parole into the country. I looked at a lot of the organization that I worked for. I think is a tragic case of an organization that's stretched too thin by brilliant people who make mistakes with other people's lives on the line, for which they don't see any consequences, and no one has held them accountable for things that I'm sure have happened like this in the past. I am an organizer. Before anything, I'm a community organizer. I don't care. I've been a director. I've been a coordinator. I've been a fellow. I've had many titles, but at my core, I am a community organizer, and you cannot put me in front of someone who's being exploited for their labor, a woman who's like my mother and me when I was that age, an elderly man who's undocumented in Mexico, and a multi-million-dollar organization with yearly revenues that can definitely afford to send this man to a place where he would receive care. Instead, I was forced to care for him and put myself at risk. I almost slipped on his urine myself in crutches. The second time, where his leg had swelled from the point of his foot to his knee, I had to tell the third person in the organization before the director that he had swelled up like a Christmas ham. I had to tell this man every inanity and every absolutely degrading thing I could think of, because it was the only way to keep him in bed and not try to stand up on what seemed to be like an infected or fractured leg, likely to be complicated from diabetes or gout. That experience, I think, snapped me out of it. The police and the concussion didn't smack the last bit of self-doubt out of my head. That experience did. And so I blew the whistle. I reported this to the General Auditor of the State of California. I tagged every foundation that I could recall worked with the organization and whose grants I had helped on or reported on. I got opinions from attorneys for different matters.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, that's the last time we clap, but we had to clap for that.
It's related to everything from tributary obligations, which were unmet by the organization and potentially myself, to the case of Mari Carmen, the nurse, and her daughter, who I still firmly believe were labor trafficked by an organization that does labor-based deferred action cases in California, and which purports to help migrants get to the other side to flee enslavement, trafficking, and violence. This woman was at risk of feminicide after her brother had already been killed in Guerrero. You put someone between a rock and a hard place and you extract labor for $18, $25 a day, and make them walk at night in Tijuana by themselves because your out-of-control employees don't know what the fuck they're doing. That's sort of the basic panorama and the overview of what's happened. I plan to record another video about different issues related to this as I write more essays for my Substack and as I explore publication in different magazines. This is the year for me of an immense dichotomy where I almost lose my mind in my life, but I also became a published author, Nexus, my childhood dream. And I became an exhibited artist at a museum for my debut show. I'm in the Antelope Valley, and I could feel the wind blow against my face for the first time in 6 years after living in a valley. Un llano entre las montañas. And now my biggest challenge is housing instability and economic precarity, but that's okay because I've been here before. I'm tough as nails now, and I'm much smarter. I'm no longer shy or humble when I don't need to be. And I'm definitely not afraid of conflict anymore. But I'm also done wasting my own time. So I hope this video found you well. I hope that hearing all this inspires some confidence or some goodwill on your part towards maybe forgiving me if I've offended or disappointed folk for my absences in the past. And I hope you know that I've always cared about all of you and that I'm here. Come up to the 661, come see the sunsets, come see the flowers when they bloom next year. I'll take you to the best cruising spots in the desert where the coyotes roam, or as soon as I find out if there's any fucking gay bars here, we can go to a gay bar. Or the Britisher, where I will be sober, not drinking. Maybe just having like a little like, you don't need to know. Okay, so I'll talk to you folks soon. GoFundMe's link is going to be posted. I'll post articles and things related to the thingies down here, including, I don't know, do you guys want to have like a chat? Do you guys want to like, I don't know, kiki hee hee about our experiences at Eris organizations and misdirector executives? No? Okay. Talk soon. Bechitos.